Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to attempt to show you some videos as part of my presentation, which notoriously will go wrong. So if I say that now, perhaps my fate won't be sealed. As Sally says, I work in the communications team, developing campaigns. The area that I work in is called vulnerable road users, of which motorcyclists are certainly, I think, one of the most easily kind of defined within that category. I guess my team's subject matter expertise is in the crafting of campaign development, developing campaigns that are clear and communicate well and reach the audiences that we plan for them to reach. But we work in very close collaboration with the Safer People team in the devising of strategy. So this presentation is a combination of strategy and execution, and it's a combination of our combined work within the teams. And I hope this will provide some insight for you as to the process of motorcycle campaign development, what informs the campaign messaging, and the stages of development that we're at, because we're actually at an interesting stage of campaign development right now. We're actually operating at the moment in two speeds in our development. For now, we're developing a revision to the established Ride to Live campaign. Some of you may be familiar with that. I have an example. We're developing that in parallel with new campaign development. Now, the purpose of running at two speeds is to be in response to the recent spike in trauma data that we've been talking about this morning. Revisions to the existing campaign allow us to be timely, to use the very latest research data that we have that helps us to craft our messaging, and allows us to deploy campaign material quickly. And in fact, that campaign will begin this weekend and runs during May and June. And then in parallel, so that we're developing something new that is fit for purpose for several years going forwards, we're developing new material altogether. So a new campaign is coming, and that is due to launch towards the end of this year. So I'm going to concentrate today mostly on the crafting of our existing campaign and those learnings that have informed that, because it's the same learnings that's going into the thinking towards the new campaign that comes later. But whereas one is a version of something you may be familiar with, the other one is, as I say, something that will be completely new. I think all of our campaigns that we develop are both evidence-based and peer-reviewed. We consult external stakeholders, and actually there are a number of people that we've consulted on this journey in the room, and I thank them for their input. It's very important when we're devising our execution that we're amply sort of demonstrating correct behavior, good road craft, if you like, in our execution to make sure that we're showing good, correct behaviors, and we rely on the expertise of others to provide us with those insights as we're crafting the material, and also the language that we use as well. And perhaps one of the most significant things that we do as the campaign developers is essentially take the technical expert textbook and translate that into something that's simple and succinct and easily digestible in campaign, because often we've only got 15 seconds. I want to start by talking Ride to Live. Some of the information that I'm sharing with you now is in the pre-read, so the data that I'm going to show you now is already published. The Ride to Live campaign was first developed in 2014, so it's been running for around 10 years now, and it was based on some then originated attitudinal research, and it combines attitudinal research, trauma data analysis, and is informed by behavior change modeling, in this case COM-B modeling, the motivation behind people's attitudes to risk. The campaign endeavors to create empathy with riders, demonstrating a passion for riding, whilst also challenging them to better manage their risks on the road. I'm going to show you one example of that now, just to familiarise yourself.
Think you've got what it takes to ride to live? Every time you ride to live.
So that's one example of a 30-second commercial. It has two different scenarios in it. And you'll see that split screen technique, which shows the consequences of the wrong choices and the positive outcome of making the right choice through that maneuver that's featured. The Ride to Live campaign, though, is more than just television execution. It's an ecosystem of material. There are examples of content that's created, so stories of popular rides. I'm sure Oxley Highway is part of that, where we take riders describing popular rides that they enjoy, but weaving in safety messages into that content. And all of our response activity leads to a hub, which is called ridetolive.com.au. There's a link in this, which you'll be able to see in the handouts that we send after the meeting. And that hub has various tools, education materials, and assets to help deliver positive rider behavior messaging. So in terms of campaign performance, and this data is in the pre-read, but have top line over time in the way that we measure behavior change, difficult to measure, but we measure people's reporting of past behaviors. So, thinking of your last ride, did you do this all the time, some of the time? We also ask them to project their future riding intentions. So in a future ride, do you intend to take this corner faster, slower, that kind of thing. And we use that to measure intent for positive behavior change within our campaigns. And you can see across all those measures, over time, the campaign has gradually built positive intention for behavior change. But what we've seen in that same analysis that we conduct each year, that there are some measures that are softening. Not least the one on the very right here, which is emotional engagement, which has been gradually declining over time, and is the driver for our recognition that the campaign is wearing out now and it's time to change it. But it's also our impetus for analysis as to how can we make some revision into the current material to make it more engaging, make that messaging more clear. And that's some of the work that I want to take you through just now. So in 2023, a new piece of attitudinal research delivered some important insights into rider and driver attitudes that we've used to progress this two-speed campaign development that I've just mentioned. Much of this will resonate, I think, with the riders in the room, and I'm going to have to lean over to read some of these out for you. So we know riding is a key part of motorcyclists' social identity. They enjoy the sense of freedom and passion and the underlying pride for their craft. They care about how the motorcycling community is perceived. Riding is seen as inherently risky, and sometimes riders view certain types of rides, like local roads, as being less risky, so there's a modulation of risk perception. Novice riders, interestingly, overestimate their skills relative to their experience, and this overconfidence is associated with risk-taking. Now, this research really did sort of delve into, as some of the conversation that we've been having today, into novice riders and experienced riders, and seeing whether we can unpick some of the messaging that we have to craft our messaging to be better tailored to novices and experienced riders. And I'll demonstrate that in some of the examples that I'll show you shortly. We always have a conversation with drivers at the same time as we are communicating motorcyclist safety messages, and we learned that there's a broad agreement that motorcyclist safety is a shared effort between riders and drivers. Drivers' top concerns of motorcyclist behaviours is changing and weaving between lanes, high speed, and the not seeing of motorcyclists. And there's a clear lack of understanding amongst drivers as to why riders conduct themselves in certain ways on the road, and so that contributes to them feeling stigmatized and drivers being frustrated. So sort of examples like moving to the front of traffic to be in a safe position is often seen as not the safe behavior that it's intending to be for a rider. It's not really understood fully by drivers. So all of this learning is helping us to craft new execution for us going forward. Perhaps some of these items for drivers will help us, particularly in new campaign development. This perception of risk has been a really important tool in helping us to identify the topics that we cover in our campaigns. This diagram on the right shows an axis of low perceived risk and high perceived risk for all sorts of different rider actions. So, for instance, riding without a helmet, riding fatigued is perceived as high risk, and it is high risk. But then towards the lower end, you have items like lane weaving, speeding, overtaking, which is perceived as lower risk. And the gap between that perception and the actual trauma data is where we find information as to the topics that we're going to cover in our campaign. So this is very important for us in terms of identifying subjects for our creative executions, as you'll see. And so ultimately what we're trying to do is to create through our campaigns a shift in perception of risk, trying to elevate it, if you like, and we generalize, but currently if the mindset is, I know how to ride a bike, so I'm already taking the right actions to stay safe, and I can determine what needs to be done based upon the trip I'm taking. And we want to shift that to, I need to ensure that every time I ride, no matter the trip, I make the right decisions and take the right actions to keep myself and the community safe. Let's now have a look, and I'll show you how we've taken some of those new learnings and new insights into campaign development. As part of our process, we didn't just take those learnings and ingest them straight into work. We devised a number of executions, and we did a phase of qualitative research to make sure that the sorts of things that we were doing were working well and clearly communicated. And it also then added to the insight and learning in terms of campaign development. So we learned that for both novice and experienced riders, they're open to reminders about safety. There's a general acceptance that messages about rider safety is important, so that's a good thing. No rider wants to be lectured or preached at, so the tone of voice that we use, very important. We've done some work in that area in the campaign development. Most will concede that they can become complacent at times and do things that put themselves at risk, so sort of acknowledge of some sort of degree of culpability there. And in this context, genuine messages about minimizing risk are seen as worthwhile. So the messaging that we've created is seen as valid and beneficial. But we also learned about tone and delivery of message as well. So there's a widespread recognition that riders are constantly learning from one another. So we've used a voice that is a voice of the community rather than a New South Wales government spokesperson. And there's also a strong feeling amongst experienced riders that those who have been riding for a long time have a lot to offer. And equally, there's a clear sense of responsibility amongst older riders to pass on their wisdom to the next generation. So that sense of, I have a responsibility as an experienced rider to exemplify good behaviour. And so that has manifested itself in the latest versions of the work. I'm going to show you a video now, which is now 15 seconds long and therefore shorter, more concise, covers only one behaviour, and there's a greater degree of description of the safe behaviour that we are looking for within this material.
Are you a rider who slows down at intersections to give yourself space? Or do you hold your speed and risk a crash? I know which rider I am. Take it easy at intersections. Every time you ride, ride to live.
So same visual material, but a different delivery in the tone. And then we move into various other executions. There's radio, outdoor, print, social and digital. I'm going to play you some radio ads because we developed some radio that can address younger riders and novice riders versus experienced riders. So it's a good demonstration of what I've just been talking about, and hopefully it's a good illustration. Radio, a lot of people ask me, why radio? Because I think we're so used to, as drivers, thinking about driving along and listening to the radio. And so, how can that possibly work for riders? Of course, riders do more than just ride a motorbike. It's actually a very strong medium for riders, and we've got some data that sort of shows that I think it was equally as effective as a medium as video in our previous campaigns. So we lean into that because it's a good way we can segment this audience between the novice rider and the experienced rider. So have a listen.
You're riding your motorbike down a country road on a group ride, and there's a camper van in front of you. Are you the kind of rider who's in a rush to pass? Or do you take it easy, remain visible, and wait until it's safe to pull out? Others are learning from how we ride. So look ahead, take it easy, and always make sure you're visible. Every time you ride, ride to live.
So
A message from the New South Wales Government.
Forgot about that bit. So that's a message to experienced riders, and you'll hear the line, others are learning from how we ride. So kind of elevating that responsibility to exhibit good riding behavior. And then this one, a slightly different version for novice riders.
You're on your motorbike, riding down a busy road, and see a camper van driving up ahead. Are you the kind of rider who's in a rush to pass? Or do you take it easy, remain visible, and wait until it's safe to make a move? I know which kind of rider I am. The road's more dangerous for us than you think. So every time you ride, ride to live. A message from the New South Wales Government.
So that concludes my presentation. I hope that gives some insight as to how we develop campaigns, and we use evidence to develop them, and perhaps gives us a little window into the thinking that's going into the new campaign that we'll be developing and consulting widely within this room as we develop it going forward. Thank you very much.